Hi, founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Samuel Finley, an educator of American founders who taught at two very important institutions leading up to the American Revolution. Now, right off the bat, to call Finley an American founder is a bit of a stretch. He lives kind of a long time and then passes away in 1766, which is really before the Revolution gets hot, so to speak. But he does educate, as it says next to me, an incredible amount of really important future founders. So let's start with his life. Finley is actually born in Ireland and emigrates to North America at about 19 years old. When he does this, he attends the Log College, as it was called, which is basically a log cabin. That was the first place that educated people in the ministry in British North America. Now, Finley goes here and he is educated as a minister, a Presbyterian minister. And this is during the First Great Awakening, a big religious revival in North America. And Finley decides to go do some traveling. He becomes an itinerant briefly in his early life. An itinerant preacher is one who would travel around spreading the word, giving sermons wherever he would be heard. Now, Finley's sermons are noted for being both religious but also educational. He really thought it was a preacher's job, a minister's job, to educate his congregation. The audience there should learn while they pray. Now, this was fine in most places, but once he got up to New England, the Anglicans up there didn't necessarily care for a Presbyterian minister, given his particular sermons in the area. In fact, at one point, Finley is actually escorted out of Connecticut and sent away. Now, after a few years of this, he ends up going to the Maryland-Pennsylvania border, and he opens up the West Nottingham Academy. The West Nottingham Academy was essentially a school for boys. It was meant to educate men from wealthy families who would expect to go on later to study at universities or colleges, either in North America that had begun popping up or over in Europe. Now, the list of founders just from this is pretty extraordinary. First and foremost was Finley's nephew, Benjamin Rush. Now, Benjamin Rush might sound familiar to you because he goes on to sign the Declaration of Independence, and he also becomes basically the founder of modern psychiatry, and just Benjamin Rush is a gigantic name in the American Revolution, as you may be aware. Again, Rush was actually orphaned as a young man, and Finley takes him in because his sister died, and here's his kid. And he takes in Rush, educates him. Now, before Rush even went there, he actually also had already educated Richard Stockton, who would go on to be Benjamin Rush's father-in-law, and oh yeah, another signer of the Declaration of Independence. Additionally, he educated people like Alexander Martin, William Shippen Jr., who would go on, both William Shippen Jr. and John Morgan, who would both serve as head of the medical department of the Continental Army and have a little bit of a rivalry of their own. John Filson, who would, some of the books he authored, particularly one about Kentucky, made Daniel Boone the legend he is. Ebenezer Hazard would be a longtime postmaster general for the Continental Army and the first acting postmaster under George Washington as president. Now, Finley spends a lot of years in this position before moving on to Princeton University. He is chosen as Princeton University. Unfortunately, he's only president of Princeton for 5 years before he passes away. Side note, what we now call Princeton, they at the time, Finley would have called it the College of New Jersey, but still, same institution. Finley goes there, and I said, just 5 years. While he's there, he increases the offerings, the programs offered by the college through correspondence with his good friend, Benjamin Franklin, who's over in England at the time. Now, his influence in Princeton is even harder to underestimate. Just for some names, Oliver Ellsworth from Connecticut came down. He was a future signer of the United States Constitution, as well as a Chief Justice, third Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He was also the person working in the Senate with James Madison in the House of Representatives, who was really responsible for the Bill of Rights getting written and passed. You also have William Patterson, another person who was a signer of the Constitution. He's the one who presents the New Jersey plan at the Constitutional Convention, really changing forever how at least part of the United States government is elected. Patterson would also work with Ellsworth as an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He also, Samuel Kirkland studied under him in Princeton. Kirkland's a little known founder. He would go on to create a university. Several of Finley's students go on to create other universities. Kirkland creates Hamilton University that he names after his friend Alexander Hamilton. But more importantly, Kirkland was also a preacher who lived in upstate New York by the Oneida Nation, and he's the one who really helped get the Oneida Nation side with the Americans. And then, after the Revolutionary War, make sure the new frontiersmen who showed up in the area and were confused why there were Native Americans still around, he pointed out, like, no, the Oneidas fought with us. Again, James Manning, who founds Brown University, and while he's in charge of Brown University, he hosts the French Army for a while. David Ramsey, who fought in the Revolutionary War, he would... I call him the father of American revolutionary history because he's one of the first people to really, after a few decades go by, writes a real history book about the revolution instead of just a memoir, as most people did at the time. Though I should note, Mercy Otis Warren, who did not study under Finley, she did write one a little bit before Ramsey did. Though hers was more political and talked a lot of trash about the Addams family. Benjamin Hawkins, Thomas Treadwell, the list goes on and on and on. It is really, really difficult for me to elaborate on his effect. And one last thing. Samuel Finley had a son who had a son who had a son. Samuel Finley had a great-grandson whose name was Samuel Finley Breese Morse, better known as Samuel Morse, who's the one who made the telegraph popular in the United States and created Morse code. It was his great-grandson and namesake, Samuel Finley Breese Morse. So Finley's legacy as an educator goes on, as you can tell. Just really hard to underestimate, like the Constitution signers he taught, the Declaration signers he taught, the university openers that he taught. Samuel Finley's educational tactics run deep in American history. So hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about him today. Thank you for watching. My name is Jason. If this is your first time watching, hit subscribe. I put out videos all week long about the American Revolution. And if you're not new here, or if you are, it doesn't matter, hit like. It's the best that you can do for the channel. I appreciate it. And I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.